That is better. So we should be live and visible at the moment. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And you are first, yes. Good morning, Corpstarch. Please let me know if you can hear me properly, since I have the washing machine on, and there's my dehydrator is on next to me. So I'm using my microphones right over there for the milling part, and I'm wearing my lavalier mic on my chest, so you can hear me while I'm walking away for pigments. So I'm fully prepared. At the moment, or right now, I'm going to start with Victoria Green PG51, a color that will be added to my new line of paints. In my reopening of the shop coming Monday. Link therefore is in the bio, but I'm still on holiday mode. So I'm opening my shop again Monday with loads and loads of exciting new pigments. There are a lot of pre-orders, but I'm working as hard as I can for this, since a lot of time and effort went into research for the pigments, which pigments work best, so which pigment number from which manufacturer, and also which would, which were missing in my line of paint. I'm still missing a few, not in my collection of pigments or the stock of pigments that I have, but I'm actually missing a few in my line still after this update, so I will be adding paints after that, but I have probably a few too many already that I will be adding. But this is a lovely pastel green single pigment paint. That also just melts into the binder, as you can see. It's almost like a pastel version of chromium oxide on the slab here, not on paper. I'm not going to taste it, but it does look like it, yes. If I were the paint maker who would name its paints like that, and you know what I'm talking about probably, this would be called pistachio, yes. Maybe pistachio sorbet. But for me, this is just going to be Victoria Green PG51, which also is already printed on the pan, so a lot of preparation goes into that as well. Not only picking out the pigments and figuring out the recipes for it, what works best for which pigment, but also printing the pans. I can make paint, but if I can't put it in a pan, it's really hard to sell. Yes, I can put it in a tube, but I wouldn't have labels for it again, so it all makes it rather hard. I'm also going to add PY53 as like a yellow. Is that dirt or hard pigment? Oh, this is dried up binder from the cap. Let's just get rid of that. So let me just take that. Nickel titanium yellow, which would be lemon meringue sorbet if I were to name it like that. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining. As you can see, this is not a hard pigment at all to mull or actually just wet. It's beautifully smooth. Very nicely flowing pigment to make into a paint. So how is everyone doing? Clean that first. In that case, good morning to you. It's quite early there, isn't it? Or is that an understatement? Yeah, that's an understatement. That's early. That is beautiful, if I may say so myself. It's hard to see since it's quite a light pigment, but it goes right underneath the 10 micrometers there. That is a long day. That is a very, very long day. Thanks to watercolorists. Yeah, we've had a great holiday. It's actually a kind of end of holiday video that I'm working on, and will be posted hopefully the weekend. So what line of work are you in? Or do we already know? I have the feeling we already know that. I have the feeling we've spoken about this before. Yes, we've spoken about, obviously. But I really didn't, that I'm making a mess now while I'm talking about. I really didn't link the hours you just named to art conservation. So, if I may ask, and absolutely watercolorist is right if you don't want to share it, but why the long hour? How the long hours? So is this a special day or is this a regular day? Ah, okay. Well, it's got to be very interesting, right? Any form of archive within your line of work would be kind of stepping into history, right? Ah, okay, so not a regular day at all. Exciting. I've printed like loads of new colors I will be adding in my shop. I've printed those pans over the last few weeks. But you know, my brand pen is, I don't know if you can see it clearly enough on the camera, but my brand pen has PG51 on it and dirty blue. But to be able to get those letters on the side, you need to use very thin lines and a slow speed for printing. So 50 of those pans, and I print multiple pigments at a time, so 10 per pigment. Sometimes. So I have some pens where I can, that I can start filling. In this case, I didn't start to fill up these yet, but it takes about 20 hours for one batch of pans to finish. It's a filament. I have a resin printer as well, but I have 3 filament printers, and I'm printing them in recycled PLA. So that's one of the things. I also sell like regular half pens. I don't have any here at my desk, but so I print these in recycled white PLA, which I'm very happy with to have found this. And it doesn't print faster. If you know 3D printing, resin printers pull the pen up from like a container of resin, and it cures the resin layer for layer by a UV laser, or in my case it's a DLP printer, but any form of UV light. It could be a LED screen, anything. But one pen is the same amount of time as 50 pens for resin printers. Whereas this one pen takes about 9 minutes. And a lot of pens take hours, days, maybe, if I fill up my entire plate. Thing with resin printers though is the resin that is on the outside, because it pulls it out of that little container of resin. It is coated with wet resin, so you need to clean it. You need to cure it in a UV curer, or whatever. It's a box that lights up. You need to clean it with IPA alcohol. There's a lot of process going on to get pans that are actually strong enough as well. If you know resin 3D printing, please, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm kind of fake in any part of that. But long story short, it's too much work for me, whereas this just keeps printing and I can just swipe them off the plate the next morning and I have clean pans that I can use and fill. Downside of this, the printers, you know, you melt plastic, it needs to be forced into a tube, it needs to be forced into a hot nozzle, they clog, they have loads of things that need to be fixed. So I have one printer that's not working at the moment since it's just not printing the way I want it to be, and then I need to find time to fix it, find the problem, take it apart, fix it. That's the downside of this. Yeah, I know there's also like resin that you can work with water, but you know, the entire process of making it as strong as this, it's faster in printing time, always, but luckily enough I have a printer where, you know, if my pans are finished, I can just literally they let go of the plate once it cools down. I can just swipe them off. That's it, right? So that's always a lot less work than any type of process that I need to do myself. Oh, this isn't really a dot. Okay, so these are all my pans of PG51. So I need to turn on my printer when I'm finished. Yeah, I have. It's not an. I have an ultrasonic cleaner as well, but I have the. It's a certain brand, so a 2-in-1 cleaner and curer. You know what I'm talking about. But it's great to just throw in the plate and mix the IPA. It works. It works fantastic. It does a great job, and the curing as well. But it's still more of a process than just doing this with a box underneath it and just that's it. And I need to sort them out on pigment number. But yeah, that's something I did to myself. I'm really happy with my pans and the way they look and well, everything, but I could have also just gone for the option of just buying pans on the internet for very cheap, which is a great option. I really envy those who use that in form of, you know, the ease of it. On the other hand, I've started with that, and to be honest, when you make ultramarine blue and a ultramarine violet, for instance, maybe an ultramarine pink, maybe a different pink, maybe a different red, maybe, and if that's in your dehydrator and you don't label them before you start to fill them, you can get kind of lost in what kind of pigment or paint is in which pan, which is what happened to me when I started. So I had to kind of swatch the, I want to swatch this as well. I had to swatch the pans, the first layer of every pan, before I knew which pigment was in it, so I could label them before I started filling them again. It wasn't really convenient. There is not enough water on my brush to make a proper swatch. Let's change that. And now let's load up some pigments. Yeah, it's Corpse Touch. I'm really happy with the personalized brand pans. It's it's something I really like about my pans, my brand. Since I'm focusing on single pigments mostly, this is something that I thought was of great importance to add to the way I can be recognized as a brand. As you can see, I have swatched different PR206s this morning, and as you can see, this is a very, very light pastel green. Like I can just take a little bit of paint out of, or maybe one that's a little bit too full. I had one of them there. Taking a bit of paint out of that, making the brush wet enough, saturated with pigment, and still it's almost like malachite. Yes, these are all PR206s from different manufacturers, and I've had the luck to not add that to my line of paint before it got extinct. So I have pigments, multiple pigments, but I'm actually going for this one. I thought this was a little bit too, I could get it less transparent. The drying shift is about equal, but this stays so much warmer and more vivid, whereas this looks very similar to PR 79, sorry. Forgetting the name here. But could you please help me with the pigment? I'm looking into the paints that I made. Yes, there will be Perylene Maroon. It is gorgeous, but oh, that's interesting, Corpse Charles. This is gorgeous, but it's too close to Perylene Maroon, or some Perylene Maroons. I will swatch mine as well later as well. But I really like this, the deepness and that kind of orangey look to it. Though I need to have a look if it isn't too similar to, let me have a look since that. Yeah, I have PO47 here as well. I need to keep those next to each other. I need to think if I need to add PR or 206 or PO47. This is way more orange and more transparent maybe. And yeah. Sorry, I need to turn that off. It is quite delicate. This is very delicate. It is very transparent, very soft. It's almost like a combination between a very light, a bluish green earth and malachite, I think. But I really love it for the pastelish look it gives as a single pigment. Yeah, they are different, but like I said at the beginning of this live, I need to make choices, like which are the ones that I need to add and which can wait. But that's just, you know, these will all be pre-orders, so I can make everything I want and just make it a pre-order and let people wait half a year for it. But I don't want to do that. Corp says making PR206 is annoying. One of the chemicals to do it is near impossible to get. Whoa, could you tell me more about that? If you have time for it. Oh, it's okay. You know, I don't want to rush you or anything, or put you up to any tasks this early in the morning. Okay. So I will get a drying rack for this one. For these, I can throw this away. Oh, one moment, please. Usually I have my drying racks on pigment types, so greens, but the plate of greens is full, as well as the yellow and oranges, which also includes the browns. So I'm collecting everything on a new plate over here. Ah. It's a wild guess, but it's probably why it's called quinacridone, right? You have to make it. PV19 as a source. I have heard about that. Yeah, I have heard. I have seen the process of making pigments into different pigments, and I have completely lost the source of that video. I think I saw it on the on another app. I'm not sure. I need to look it up. Maybe I can find it. Maybe I've seen it there. It could be. Let me just kind of reorganize this a bit. So read the state for the pans to join it. And in this case, I'm really happy. I'm really happy that I have my pigment numbers on the side of the pans. Since, you know, this is quite recognizable. The oranges, PO73, PBR11 as a brown, PG51 here. But if I come back in a few days when everything's dry, that would be terrible kind of to remember everything from that entire dehydrator, which was which pigment. So let's have a look what we will make next. Hi Sandra, you are not too late. I just finished PG51. I'm now going to start a different color. Hey, what colors? It would make sense. Please, Corpsage, help out if you know it, but they all have quite similar characteristics and looks to it, so would make sense. Let's have a look what we're going to make. Oh, I think this is interesting. And did I already start on that as well? I think I did. Very mysterious what I'm doing here for you guys, I think. So I'm looking at pans that I have started, and those that are dry enough to refill. And I'm looking at a hue, a type of PR101. That I actually Hey, Paint and Ironing, welcome. Thanks for joining, and please just take a peek. I'm actually, so this is really annoying. I don't know which PR101 this is. This could be one of two. I only have two PR101s that I'm working on. Oh yeah, please send it to me. And I think this is Caput Mortuum. I know this is Caput Mortuum when I do it like this. Okay, great. Great, great, great. Oh, I love this iron oxide pigment. Yeah, you can, I think you can share it here, right? It doesn't go against any guidelines, I think. Not my guidelines, but... So, PR101, Caput Mortuum. This has been on my list of things I wanted to make as well. It is a thread on Reddit, yes. It's very violet when you compare it to Indian Red PR101. It's more transparent as well, and I love, and you can be a witness of it. I love what this thing does when you make paint out of it. So when it's on the slab, good morning, Janina, and good morning, everyone. I see more people have joined us. If you haven't already, like the live so more people will be introduced to it. Also, we have gained a lot of followers, more followers. We are past the 1300 now on my channel, so very thankful, grateful for everyone that joins us here. As you can hear, this is way more scratchy than the last one, but again, this is a pigment that just melts into the binder beautifully. Okay, so let's mull it. It might be noisy. It might not be. Nah, it's noisy. But as you can see, the pigment itself, it's a very dark, dull violet brown, grayish even. The paint itself here looks very similar to Indian red when I'm mulling it. And the swatch separates into something very beautiful. This will be in the shop as well, by the way. So this is the first time, not the first time. I do offer 3 versions of PBR 7, but this is the first time outside of the PBR space. There will be 2 pigment numbers. Well, the 2 of the same pigment numbers. I do have lapis lazuli and synthetic ultramarine, but I don't think that doesn't count. I don't think that does count. For those who are joining, who just have joined or kind of missed the start of it, I'm just here making paint. I'm reopening my shop Monday and I am adding a lot of new pigments. Just having a quick look. I think it would be more than 10 single pigments that I will add to the line of paint, which will be regulars as well, depending on how much of the pigment I have or can still buy or get. I showed 3 versions of PR206 I made this morning, very early, and I've actually chosen to go with this one. This looks a little bit too much like Perylene Maroon. This one was, I couldn't get more transparent than this, but this one did. I really like this one, PR206, the extinct quinacridone, one of the extinct quinacridones. I just made PG51, Victoria Green. which will also be in my shop. And this is Caput Mortem, which is drying still a bit, but you can see the drying shift here, and this is the fresh paint, and this is the swatch. There's like a black separation, granulating effect here, violet brownish in the mask tone and the washes. So I really love the way this paint acts on paper. It's way easier to get a transparent wash of this than you can do with the Indian yellow from my line, but the Indian yellow it's more one color, whereas this separates. It is a single pigment. Yeah, Monday. The countdown is on my Instagram, but I will share swatches of everything, and all the products that will be in my shop, at least all the pigments, single pigments that will be in my shop, I will share them on my social media here and my Instagram before that time. So during the weekend I have a lot of work to do, I have to be honest, so I really hope I make it, but I had to have a kind of a deadline, so I know I will make it, but last summer has been too humid actually. We haven't been here, or I haven't been in my studio for a few weeks, so there were some pens that were supposed to dry in the dehydrator that didn't really dry because of the humidity, and there were paints that were already dry that because of that humidity in the dehydrator with all the wet paints rehydrated a bit. So that set me back a few weeks. Oh, that has some cool pieces in it. It's really interesting, this drying shift, and also the it's not only the drying shift but also the change of character when you compare it to the wet state of the paint versus the blue state of the paint, and when it's dried into dried in the pen, and when you re-wet it, when it's dry in the pen, it's almost a very dark, it could be like a very dark red, it could be a very blackish brown. When you put a drop of water on it, it turns into this. When you swatch it, it turns into that grayish violet. It does a lot of things. Also now here, and probably the people from around here will know, but suddenly the first week of September decided to be around 30 degrees Celsius again outside. What we've missed most of the time in August. We're getting back like in a few days here. So it's really hot in my studio. I have an air conditioning here, which I most of the time use to dehydrate the air, then like to cool it down, but it's not turned on at the moment since it's behind me at the wall there. And while making paint, I really don't have that thing on. At least not on the setting that I want it to be in this temperature, since I don't want it to blow any kind of dust my way when I'm sitting here with a slab of wet paint. But it is far too hot, especially in a few hours, to do this. Yeah, I thought it would be the same kind of weather at where you are based, Sandra. So I've added a little bit of water to it. I can feel the difference on the slab. We're using a lot of downforce pressure. Welcome for those who are joining us either again or maybe completely new to the live. If you like chatting about pigments, please join the chat. If you like just reading or listening or looking, please like this live stream. I think this should be very close, if not already there. That is better. Okay. Oh, that sounds a bit better. The weather over there, although I know Scotland a bit, it's quite unpredictable. Well, that's an understatement as well. The times I've been to Scotland was, well, we never looked at the weather forecast again after the first 3 days. But it is a beautiful country. And yes, I'm considering Scotland a country. Exactly that. Yeah, we've been. The first time I went there was during my time on the Art Academy, field trip to Scotland, and follies, things like that. We've been going outside a lot for outdoor art, and one of the greatest memories I had. We were walking outside. We stepped out of the bus, like we went onto a field. I think we just saw hills and grass to the horizon, maybe a little valley with beautiful colors of flowers and things like that. And it was an endless scenery of just nothing. No roads, nothing. And we needed to find a sculpture from an artist. So we walked for, I think, 4 hours. And during that time, I've never seen rain that heavy. And I've never dried up as quickly after that as well. Like, you were soaking wet within 10 seconds. Like, to the bone. And you were completely dry within 5 minutes as well. So it was, yeah, it was a weird experience. A lovely one, but and there were those people from my class, very cute, who brought an umbrella. They all got destroyed by the wind. So I recently got the question, why is it you pour it into pans and you know yours look like this, or handmade watercolors look like this, and when I buy them from the store, they always look like the same pillowy, they don't touch the sides, things like that. Within our niche here and within the group of people that are watching, you probably know, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway. A while back I went to a paint manufacturer here in the Netherlands, and I've seen it before at the exact same place there, but it's nice to compare it like when you're actually making paint and are kind of competitors, or not, that I consider myself to be a competitor of the big brands. But I'm making paint as well, so there's some similarity there. What they do, they make paint like buckets, not buckets, swimming pools at a time, and they put that in kind of a dryer that constantly moves the paint and dries it out until a very paste-like consistency until it breaks. Then that gets, like, sometimes by hand still, but sometimes it just gets like poured over or turned over into a machine, and it makes kind of the thick paste gets squeezed out of a tube. So you have kind of a long sausage, almost kind of a chocolate bar, a very thin chocolate bar of paint that just comes rolling out over a line. That is dried a bit, and when it's the right temperature or right hardness, it gets chopped into pieces that just fit into an empty pan, which is done by hand, by the way. So those cakes of paint that have been squeezed out of a tube, put in the oven, and then kind of glued with a drop of gum arabic, I think, into that pan, makes the difference between pouring layers. And as far as I know, but please correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows, I think Schminke, as a very like mainstream big brand, does it. I know Crema Pigment sells their paint like this, poured into a pan. Roman Small does it. I think the other brands all do it like this. I'm not sure about that. Does anyone have experiences? And it's extruded, yeah. So I'm just looking to see if I have an example over here. I've given most of my... I'm sorry for the noise, by the way. I'm looking for pans of paint of different brands, and actually I've given most away. Oh yeah, I've actually found. So I find okay, now I can't close it anymore. So this is extruded paint. So this fell out of the pen. And this is just, you can see it, this is the shape of that extruder. And that's just a long line of it which gets chopped and dropped into an empty pan. You can see the air bubbles in the extruded piece. So this is how they fill their pans compared to what I'm filling here. And I'm just taking an empty pan here as a comparison. Can I fit it in? I can't get it out anymore after this, I'm afraid. Well, just let's do it. Well, it fits nicely. You see, so this is how they do it. But on the sides, everywhere, there's a gap. So compared to what a finished pan of mine looks like, or this, I think, yeah, mine contain a bit more paint, but this looks perfect like this. Easy when you do it. I think when you mass produce it. Yeah, I have to agree, Corp Starch. And thanks. I try to keep in mind. Okay, one topic at a time. I have to agree with that the poured ones. It's also the consistency, because I know that poured ones that I know of usually contain something like honey or similar, and I know the ones that are extruded a lot of times don't. So there's a difference. Has to do with the re-wettability of it. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. Yeah, Rembrandt. This is, by the way, probably a Rembrandt pan. Okay, I can get it down like that. I think this is from Talents. Not sure about it though, but I know most of my old paint that I used here, I bought from them, because that was kind of the easiest brand to get my hands on when I started. Schmink pours it. Huh. Maybe they changed it. I don't know. Does anyone know about that? Is Paint in Hiding still here? I think she isn't. Since she was just having a peek. And it's the reason. It's also not the same recipe, so that's another thing. I know when you buy brands that have extruded pans and tube paint, aren't always the same recipe. So when you squeeze a tube out in a pan, for some brands they just crack up, fall apart in the pan, are just way too brittle. While the extruded pans don't do that. So there, I know, I don't know what the difference is, but I have been told by the manufacturer itself, it is a different recipe, it is a different consistency, because it's a different product. Schmink, I think, uses the exact same paint in their tubes as they do in their pans. I can't speak for other brands. And yeah, most student grades paints are extruded. I think it's just, you know, the mass production of it makes it cheaper to produce it like that. Like I said, it's not better or worse. There's no right or wrong in this. It's just different. And to come back at the comment, my pans are loaded. Thank you very much. I try to find a neat balance between a generously filled pan and something that fits into a watercolor palette. Because I've had some artists who gave me some feedback. They had some critique about me filling my pans up too much. The lovely pillow-topped, almost muffin-like half pans you see from handmade watercolor paints, they look gorgeous. And when you put them like in a big watercolor palette, when they don't touch each other, that works great. When you put a drop of water in it, and you can, you know, it doesn't matter if it flows over a bit. But I've had a complaint from someone who buys my paint and does professional artwork that she can't take my paint into her palette. She couldn't, sorry, because it, oh, like that, flows over and touched the other paint. So I've been looking and I've found a balance between that, and I think this is already a bit much, but this is like generously filled, but still, if there's paints next to each other, it wouldn't flow over into the other pan, or so. Also, the reason why the big brands are more filled like this, whereas this would need a little layer, generous dot of paint on top of it. The port pans of different brands, you see, have that little dent in it, or maybe a bit flat, but that's because of artists in mind and a palette in mind as well. Taking paints with you and you know, making sure nothing flows into each other. So there's that about the amount of paint in my pans. If anyone was wondering, if you weren't, you know now. So I'm making swatches for my Etsy listings and spectrometer readings. So those will be added to my Etsy listing as well, hopefully when I'm opening. But I'm adding spectrometer readings to it as well. So you can expect something of a chart like the hue circle that I've showed before, but just with my paints in it. For the painters among us here, I know that doing this and just moving a cloth over it and wiping it away seems like a really, really big waste. And sometimes I actually really agree with you. But like this, there wasn't really much more I can take off the plate. Even with a wet palette knife, there's not much I can take it off. So this is just that very tinting iron oxide, that very thin layer that just looks like a lot of paint. It's not a lot of paint. You can paint a lot with it, but it's not a lot of paint, if that makes sense. When you clean this up, this is where that magic of that caput mortuum kicks back in. You can see I'm just kind of doing this a bit. You can see that bright Indian red hue, like, and when it's sinking down, let me just, if I can, there's that violet that shines through as well, an almost black layer underneath it. So there's loads of layers. I've tried the monoprints or monotype before, but often it feels really kind of let me have a look if I can find a piece of paper. Okay, so this is actually a piece of high quality watercolor paper with it was stuck between a drawer, so let me just have a look if I can make some nice swirls in it. A little bit more pigment over there. Oh, come on. Getting stuck to that plate. Letting this sink in for a bit. Yeah, shall I it is quite a wet plate. What shall I do? Shall I pre-wet the paper as well? Why not? Do we have a paint subscription already? It has been an idea of mine, but shall I just zoom out a bit, or else that will be like the most boring live stream ever. Can we all agree that this is a great time to take a cup of coffee? Janina, I really, it is a very good idea, and I fully agree with you. Sorry about the noise that I am making at the moment. It's a great idea. If I have more time and things kind of, you know, my shop is up and running again, and I am more organized in the way things like, okay, which pigments are in my main line of paint, which are kind of in the near future, and which are nice but not necessary. So really nice single pigments, maybe mixes that I can add as a subscription, maybe limited editions because I don't have a lot of pigment of it. Let's talk about that with a cup of coffee. So I'm leaving my mic here. Coffee time. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, my coffee is ready. Let's clip on this mic again. Okay, I'm back. So where were we? Limited edition would be the premium tier, but I guess there are enough people waiting to collect the normal paints as well. So what would be, sorry, what would be normal to add to a subscription? I have loads of ideas. I have tons of, I have too many ideas of limited palettes or a new kind of line, a collection of a certain thing. But it's all, for me, it's, I want to add that to a wider audience as well. It's really hard for me to decide which is the right direction for that. And since I think there are five very loyal viewers here at a time, I'm going to share something with you, something very special for those of you who rewatch this and watch this piece of paper, or just entered and watched this piece of paper. We just took a cup of coffee for those of you who are still here, coffee, and we put a piece of wetted watercolor paper on the slab, which was just used to make caput mortuum. You can see here that like almost black pigment settling down on the palette knife beautifully. Shall I take it off? Shall I take it off? Shall I just wait? I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to tell you something very exciting. So I have previewed this on my Instagram. Just going to put it on here. A little dusty. I have previewed this on my Instagram. Since I was working on something very exciting. I was someone contacted me and they asked me a question to make a custom paint, which is always quite exciting, but also something, you know. Tell me first what the idea is, or what your vision is on the paint. Before I can say yes. This is a test I made for that. Made out of ash. So these aren't organic ashes. This is a test I made of something that comes quite close to it, because I have been asked to make watercolor paint out of the remains of someone's pen. Which is, it still needs to be sent to me, the small amount of ash that I need to make a pan of watercolor paint. But it needs to, I have been researching, working with a material, pigment-like material, that I've never thought of that I would work with. So this is quite an exciting thing for me to kind of work on and be part of someone's something that was that close to someone. Yeah, I've also, you know, I've read into it. I've seen people mixing it into paint or making it, you know, into a product. But you know, for me, I've seen the ashes of family members. I haven't seen it of my own pets since they weren't cremated. But there's so much difference in color, consistency, fineness of the remains of a loved one, whether it is a pet or a person. It's kind of, it was kind of, I needed to take a step back before I decided to do it, because it was, okay, this is something completely different. But I was approached because of my videos about pigment and about making paint. So I was honored as well, and I'm waiting for it to arrive or be shipped. So that was, it's quite special, things like that. Let me now just read into the chat with a coffee. Curated palettes. I think for the mass market, maybe selling palettes based around specific eras. Yes, that is one of the things I've been thinking about. So I have my Egyptian palette. I don't know if you are familiar with it. Actually scooped out a layer of, this is one that I use myself. I scooped out a layer of malachite, since the malachite I had, the batch of malachite, was not right at all. I could literally just break it off, and this is the good malachite that doesn't yellow as soon as it re-wets. But I had a layer of malachite that yellowed, like I touched it with my brush and it yellowed instantly. So this is my Egyptian palette, which now has the pigment numbers on the back, my logo on the back. It has a wrapper if you buy it, and this is painted if you buy it as well. So this is one that I use myself. Egyptian, Renaissance, a medieval palette, Baroque, yes, all great examples. Oh, that goes a little bit of malachite. Well, luckily it's nothing really important. Corpse Starch, if you want to, you can help me with figuring out what to put in those palettes, because that list kind of grows, and I want something to be quite, portable, but also I've made this Egyptian palette since, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this is from the Smithsonian. I don't know. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know where the original is from. Again, I've lost that. I will look it up. But this is kind of a remake, a modern remake of an existing palette. So shape-wise, with this hieroglyph and the color a bit. And there's another Egyptian palette there, which I think used to be a makeup palette more, but nice idea. But I like this. These are great pigments. It's maybe not the original pigments. I've used a sky blue lapis lazuli for it. I think it was Egyptian blue in it, but this was for me more affordable than Egyptian blue at the time, at least. I have malachite, yellow ochre, brown ochre, red ochre, and bone black. It's probably carbon black or maybe fine black that's in the original, but I think bone black as a watercolor fitted best. So I kind of looked at, okay, I want to say as close as much to the original hue wise, pigment wise. I want something to be as versatile as possible when you think of it as a watercolor palette. So keeping aside the Egyptian part, I want it to be as usable as possible as well. So those were my decisions, kind of my take on it. I'm going to look up your Reddit post in that case. Maybe I've read it. Maybe I've read. That's why it's called Reddit. But maybe I've seen your post. Okay, let's just. Okay, like this, nothing happened at all. I'm just going to put my Grand Muller over it. I wasn't really active on Reddit back then, but I may have used a high resolution version of Reddit when I looked it up for mine, so it could be, yeah. Now, well, what it does, it's more like that it's more potter's pink. I'm going to let this dry anyway, and probably that same drying shift will happen here as well. So that beautiful kind of grayish separation will happen here. It's not bad, but you know, it's not that either. So I'm going to let this dry. Yeah, I can imagine. It's also nice, but triads kind of, yeah, you know. I also want to honor like a certain era enough. So I think I've done that with the Egyptian palette. I think I've done that. And to come back at what you would need if you want to make it authentic, carmine, Dutch vermilion. I don't want to put highly toxic or very fugitive paints pigments in it. So thanks, Corpstarch. I would use a vermilion hue, for instance. I can make historically accurate things, but there's another idea I have for a different kind of palette for that. So decisions. They will all be released at a certain point, just not all at once. Arsenic, no, I won't ship that to, at least I won't ship any arsenic containing paint from my shop, since I want people to, well, I don't want to be responsible for anything if people are kind of uncareful or just neglectant with what they are using. But you know, what is where's the line for toxic? Right, so I'm not offering cadmiums at the moment, since well, as a business, and you as someone who works in art conservation, there are ways to arrange that, but I wouldn't sell it as something I would offer as a product. No. But you know, about if I want to stay as historically accurate as possible, I have Paris green here, the Schweinfurter Grün. I have the pigment, so I can make that in a secure environment. I can show it, but I can also replicate it with non-toxic, stable pigments that, you know, I can just sell. So you know what my preference has as a business, probably. About other toxic things, I do sell cobalts, which is not highly toxic, but it's not good for you. Any heavy metal. I have I have all cadmium hues from lemon yellow to almost brown. Yeah, there's actually nothing toxic that I can think of that I don't have in the collection of pigments. But there's loads of things that I would never offer. There's loads of manganese pigments that I offer and will offer, which are also harmful. So I need to make a distinction between harmful and toxic in that case. Genuine vermilion, for instance, any mercury containing pigment, I'm hesitant about offering that. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not making toxic pigments at the moment or harmful pigments at the moment. Although, you know, you don't want to have too much iron oxide pigments in the air when you're sitting here all day. No, genuine vermilion is something the same as orpiment or a gamboge. I think, you know, historically they have their place. But exactly. But that's why I'm also not offering cadmiums. That, and I don't want cadmium pigment to fly around in a room, especially during the day. So that is also a distinction that I make when I make paint during the day like this. I know my girls will be at home in 3 hours. I need to pick them up in 3 hours from school. And my studio is just connected to the home. There's literally no door. There's one door in between, by the way. But when I start, when I end making paint or even end my live stream, I put my entire air filtration system on. I have now one air filtrator on here on my desk. Maybe you can hear it. But I will turn my entire ventilation system on, including my air conditioning that just blows most of the air towards this side, with 2 air filtrators over here, which just circulates when I close the door. So I know, and I have a little air quality sensor here as well, which tells me how many particles are in the air. They all kind of, you know, help me with staying safe while making paint, which is really important. But during the night, for instance, or late in the evening when my girls are sleeping, I can make more harmful pigments since my air filtration will go on at night as well. So I know that they won't be running around here. They're not running around in my studio, but they won't be near my studio here. So they can't breathe in any harmful dust, which happens way too often. I'm not attacking anyone and I don't want to offend anyone, but please don't let your kids help you make paint, since it flows around too much in the air. Pigments, even non-harmful pigments, are little particles that don't belong in your lungs, and especially those little lungs. So yeah, so no, exactly, Corpsage. So that was actually what I'm saying. Even and I need to make paint again. I can walk. I have a microphone on. Even pigments that aren't cadmiums, which are a lot of them, But also a regular yellow ochre has its warning signals. Like, be careful, because it may contain some metals that can be harmful when inhaled or digested, inhaled, or too much, right? So, yeah, I'm quite careful when it comes to that. What to make next? What time is it? Okay, do I have those pens? Let me have a look. $2.30. Oh, that's kind of a good morning, right? Let me have a look. Swallium, okay, no, yes. And titanium white is another one too. Probably the scariest one, since everyone talks about how safe it is, and it's used on things like M&Ms. But tell me, scary how? Like, for inhaling it? We right now here have PB60. By the way, since we're still making paint, is that, I know, like, everything with a metal in it is kind of something that I'm very careful with, but ooh, does that also go for buff titanium? Probably, right? Since it's yeah. Well, this pigment here, PB60, is a very fine pigment. So that's also something that, you know, there's no big warning labels with this one. Apart from the fact that it's not a natural thing to get in your lungs, so please leave it out of there. PB16 is a regular one. This is PB6T. Lindenthrow blue, yes. Or anthraquinone blue. I don't know how to pronounce that. This like starts, no, 6T, I'm sorry. 16 is a regular one as well. I make phtalos. I actually don't do a lot of phtalos during the life, since it makes too much of a mess. I think I've done one last time. I think I've made PG7, phthalo green last time. But this is like Prussian blue meets indigo over here, and then when you completely wet it, it's just pure ballpoint ink. I love that. You can already tell in my, I don't know, this is, I don't know if you can see it from the top, but from the side here, this is like the entire bottom of my muller is covered with ballpoint ink. You also did PB17 at a point. Yes, that's a regular actually for mine as well. I got the pigment from a pigment supplier here, and I put it in a jar, but I forgot that I had 2 bags of the pigment. Small. I'm not talking about big bags. Small bags. So I refilled the jar recently. I think I made PB17 last time as well. Last life. So this is my technique. I call it my technique, but I'm not saying I invented it, but I use this for wetting a hydrophobic, very fine pigment, pouring the binder around the dry pigment here, and then spreading it out a little part at a time, where the slab is already sticky with the binder, to incorporate it slowly, and don't have a lot of dust flowing around here. But you can see, that's the side of the muller here, you can see that it's already kind of, it is airborne at the moment. It does settle on my muller already, so. Maybe take it even a little bit slower. I have my pens over here. This will also be available as a pre-order coming Monday. Since there are, well, you know, you guys know your pigments, know your paints, know what you like, know what you don't like. A question for me to you: what is a pigment that you like from a certain brand that you go back to every single time, that only that brand has, maybe, or has the best version? For those of you who are joining my lives more often, either the rewatch, or when you rewatch it at the moment, or during the live in the chat, you know that there are some pigments that I just couldn't get my hands on. I actually managed to get in contact for those pigments, and I'm getting samples of all those pigments that I can't get my hands on. So it's just samples though. But PBR 25 from Holbein. I need to look that up. I'm really, you know, I'm just going to taking this. I'm going to take the tablet here. I'm going to look that up. Let me have a look. PBR 25 Holbein, and this one, swatched by Kimberly Crick, and I do offer it as well, right? I think I offer it as well. I wanna compare, like, some pigments that I have towards people's favorites from other brands, because I made decisions for myself when I introduced something into my line of paint. I try as much different pigments from as much different pigment suppliers, and I don't mean pigment shops, but really pigment manufacturers more, because there are loads of pigment shops that I can buy pigment, but they all come from the same manufacturer, so it would be a waste of money to buy every shop's version of ultramarine blue deep, for instance, while it all comes from a same factory. So I need to do a background check. Where does the pigment come from? Where is it manufactured? Can I get it straight from the manufacturer, which also saves me money? Can I find different versions, like the PR206 I have? And I'm then comparing it to, okay, what do I already have and what do I think is a good addition? But then there's the other step, and that's the thing I'm looking at right now. What do others offer? And what do customers, painters, users like more? And is that similar to a version I have in my pigment collection, but chose not to offer? Maybe I can switch it. Maybe I can, introduce both in my line of paint. Thank you for the green umber version. I really like my green umber as well. That was like, since I was working on a green earth back then, and raw umber, I was really hesitant about, okay, shall I introduce like green umber next to it? And then actually I didn't put green earth into my line of paint because I didn't like the pigment I had, since it was on green earth. PG23 is one of the lowest tinting transparent pigments there are, but there's still a big difference between different pigments. Thank you very much. It's really nice how you talk about that. The texture of paints that persuades you. I need to put that into like a quote next to the paint. Thanks, it really means a lot to me. Cobalt blue deep from Roman small. Couldn't find something in a tube the same hue, but in a pan. Is it available in a pan, or is it? Now this is getting, I'm kind of, I just want to re-wet everything, but this is, I'm more making a paste right now than a dispersion. Beautiful when you re-wet it, and I know it's like you can see the transparency on the slab from above. That's the ballpoint blue that I was talking about. I have seen people, I haven't seen them in a while though, on a different app, let me just put it like that, making paint and not mulling. And I've seen them using this pigment as well. And literally what I just scraped off the side of my muller there, this grainy paste of paint. I have seen people put this straight into a pan. And that hurts so much seeing that. And yet, loads of people were very enthusiastic about the paints. So, but I wouldn't risk it. Let's have a look. Roman small, cobalt blue, deep. Where's my tablet? Where did I leave it? Here it is. Roman small, cobalt blue, deep swatch. Which pigment number is that? Is that PB28? PB74, I think. At least that's what I quickly can find, PB74. Which I think this would be a real coincidence, but it is. Let me have a look. PB74. This is not something I'm offering, by the way. But this is kind of sitting here waiting for me to do a little comparison of blues. I have a ultramarine blue PB28, cobalt blue, a cobalt blue deep PB74, and Yinmin blue to swatch them next to each other. I've done this before, but in a vertical mode for I think a very short video. So as you can see, this pigment, it just eats binder moisture. It's not, like, for the viewers, it's not the most fun thing to watch, I think. I can say this from experience. Most people rave about bad paints because they haven't tried the top and or they only have used lower quality things, so it makes sense. Yeah, but I think, you know, a cobalt and a cobalt pigment and an ultramarine pigment, whether we're talking about violets or blues or greens, but you know, that's been a while since ultramarine was part of that group. They can exist next to each other for the more serious painters or pigment enthusiasts or watercolorists among us. But when we're talking about, especially when we're talking about acrylics or oils, when you don't have that, you know, don't have any form of granulation. But we're talking about transparency and drying times and things like that. That aside, looking at watercolors, they all have their same. They all have their own reason to be in a palette, but for some people it's just not worth it. And I want that to be kind of an ultramarine blue, a deep one, or just an ultramarine blue and a PB74 cobalt blue deep, or a PB28 cobalt blue. Hue-wise can be very close, and that's why I have those four over here, like these four. Yinmin blue is just in between that cobalt blue and ultramarine, but they mix differently. Their transparency is differently. They all granulate. Same for greens, like, or violets. But I want to offer things. My ultramarine blue is quite vibrant, so that cobalt blue deep could exist next to it. The cobalt blue could exist next to the ultramarine blue, and the Yinmin is just kind of a novelty, which I really love as a pigment and the properties behind it. But that also, you know, when you're not as serious about pigments as we are, you wouldn't even consider paying 50 euros for a half pan of a pigment that just looks like a mix of two things that are way cheaper. But this as well, offering this next to Prussian blue, for instance, people would say, yeah, I already have Prussian blue. I can mix this with ultramarine, for instance, or I can mix this with a phthalo blue. I get that same kind of non-granulating people who live in the equatorial band lose their ability to see green over the lifetime. Wow. Just because it's, you know, a less common color there, or same as people who live in areas where there's almost always ice or snow, they can see so many more hues and colors of white, different tints of white than we can. So it's just environment is of big influence of our visual system. The effect of bright sun on the eyes. Really? Oh, is that the whites or the greens? Because, you know, also, you know, being in touch with a lot of colors helps make, you know, see differences in colors more easy, but losing the ability to I should have started with this pigment. One thing, I don't need to go to the gym anymore today. I'm burning my calories as we speak. Janini has my ultramarine, and they are very close, a different watered down and mixes and in granulation. Yeah, but that's the thing. But that's my first part of the podcast series. I'm kind of in doubt for the second part, which direction I should go or which topic I should kind of start with. But about the first one, that's my fascination with pigments. They all have their own personality. They all have their right to exist next to each other, and you know, especially in watercolor paint, when we are talking about diluting them with water and granulating effects. Oh, that sounds like something you should be aware of before you started doing that. So do you notice anything different now, or did that go so slowly over time that you didn't notice it? But yeah, I'm glad you don't add taste to that, because, you know, please don't put it in your mouth. But physical joy of painting involves sight, smell, and touch. So yeah. Apart from when you're working with indigo, then, you know, that joy of smell fades away pretty quickly, in my opinion. Ah, okay, good. Glad to hear it could be reversed. And yes, as been said earlier in the chat, this is a very thirsty pigment. Maybe 3 scoops of it was a bit too much for now. At least we can make a lot of first layers and a lot of dots. So I'm trying to offer dots of every paint that I offer in my line next Monday, as well as pre-orders of any new paint. Some of them will be in stock, some of them will still be kind of drying. My dehydrator is on 24/7 at the moment. You have one paint that has rosemary oil, which you find a touch off-putting. Yeah, I'm using an oil, and I might have found a replacement for it, or not an oil. It is kind of oily, but I found a antibacterial conservatant, I think, that is without odor. It is natural, but the odor has been taken out of it. And I'm really glad with that, because I don't like the smell of clove oil. It's not off-putting for me. It's not like I have like, I hate it, but it's too out there. Same as lavender oil. I really like it, the smell of it sometimes, but not when it's my job and I'm sitting like 6 hours a day above my slab here, or filling pans, or, you know, in that room where the smell is. Even air purifiers can't take that smell out of that quickly. So I'm really glad with the odorless natural stuff I'm using. But I was afraid I couldn't find it anymore. It was from France. And the shop that I bought it from doesn't exist anymore. But I've probably found an alternative. I have enough of it though. So I'm first going to try it out. The dots are so generous, I was able to really judge how it would work with my other paints. Thank you. That was really something that I aim for as well. I think they are, if you're talking about my dots, anyway, I think they are about the same size as some mini pens. But yeah, I'm really glad with the design. I'm just going to say that I'm really proud of the design. Janina, my co-worker, and I painted with acrylics with our elderly patients and employees, and it was so obvious if people aren't used to see different colors or even hues. Yeah, I can imagine. Thank you about the dots. Phthalo green for leaves. Well, maybe they experience the world, you know, they remember that vibrant. That could be nice, right? If your memories of, or your, like, inside your head, the world looks that vibrant and chemical. Well, maybe that's not nice if you see the world in a phthalo hue. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm looking into selling my paints into a local art supply shop, and I've been visiting the shop more often lately. I was talking about, you know, working with pigments and the different property of pigments with a customer who was kind of choosing, and I thought, you know, maybe I'm just going to share my 5 cents. And I was really surprised by how many people just, and I've been there as well, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there's just not enough pigment education around here, around there in the world, to expect from people that they know what to use. Because if you look at a label, that's a really nice hue of blue, or that's a really nice blue, and they take it and then they mix it, and then, you know, what that person said to me, I keep adding paint and I keep putting on layers and layers and layers, and it just didn't get any darker or deeper. And I think they actually took from a certain brand a smalt hue, which was really transparent, beautiful color, beautiful lavenderish transparent blue, but it didn't matter how many layers they put in, it just didn't become an opaque layer, because that's what they needed. And it was an expensive tube of paint. The most important part with painting is just have fun with it, you know. But if technical difficulties take away the fun, that barrier should be taken away. Same with photography. You can give someone a DSLR or a digital camera without a mirror and a great lens on it, but if it's on manual mode, you need to know what exposure is, you need to know what an aperture is, you need to know what the ISO is, you need to know the shutter speed, you need to know so many factors that a regular camera just does for you. And when you're shooting in RAW and you put it on your computer and you're expecting a JPEG that just, you know, is something you can share on social media, but then you have a RAW image that needs to be first edited into, you know, something that I really like with photography and editing. But when you give people a professional camera on that setting with RAW and manual, they start to hate photography because everything they thought they would like about it, making a nice picture, taking a nice photo, is just taken away. And I think that's really comparable with the role of pigments. Some people just want to take paint out of a shelf, out of the packaging, put their brush in it, and just paint with the color that they expect to see. And that's why the student quality paint, but also the paint for kids, is also is always so filled with brightness, fillers, white pigment, just because an ultramarine blue in a pan of kids paint never looks as a dark blue like this in my paint. This is pure pigment with binder. An ultramarine blue that has been used in kids paint is always mixed with white to give it a blue that they expect in that pan. They expect this, right? And this is ultramarine blue to them, or cobalt blue, or whatever. But they would never buy something like this because that just looks too dark. It's not appealing to the eye. It's not what, you know, gives us the joy of working with colors. Part of it is just seeing the colors in the palette. So I'm sorry, I'm going on too much about that. Exactly. So I need to read into the chat again. So I lost myself there. Thank you for appreciating the channel. It is about the joy of painting. Thanks for understanding. And yeah, it's not even phthalo blue. I mean, phthalo blue is really a brand name, or brand name. It's really a. Then they use sky blue, for instance, because phthalo blue looks very dark with like that red kind of shimmer to it. They use sky blue or something like that, which just, you know, when you look closely, and it does have pigment information. It says PB15, but it contains white pigment because PB15 is never a sky blue when it dries, or as a dry pigment for that matter. So, oh, I really should have thought about just putting 2 scoops of this pigment on my slab. Well, it gives us a long live stream, right? Hear me ranting a bit, joining the chat if you want to. Well, but are they great for mixing? Janina. I'm just reading out your comment. If you buy a cheap 12 to 24 color set, you get mostly colors that are great for mixing, but that means you need to know how to mix. And you know, it's not mandatory to put those fillers or brightness on the list, on the label. So the muted color palette by Van Gogh, Van Gogh, I'm sorry, I'm Dutch, I need to pronounce it correctly. It is a very nice one. But you're expecting something different when you're buying something cool like that. But for me, just to, and I'm losing viewers here, I can tell that, but this is my niche, this is our niche. I'm just going to rant on about it. For me, great mixing is done with single pigments. And none of those things have single pigments. Right? So, can everyone kind of still see and hear me properly? Because I'm getting a notification there that my bit rate is going down a bit. Okay, good. Well, but that's the thing, Janina. Exactly what you're saying. I love convenience colors because they taught me mixing, because you were interested in looking into it. And that's something rare as well. Because most of the times, you know, people buy a convenience mix, so they don't have to mix themselves, which is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But there is a big difference. And I'm just going to have a quick look here, and I really need to be careful that I don't mess things up while I'm having a look over here. Yeah, I have a very cheap palette, a very cheap palette over here that I actually bought for my girls, and even they did not want to use this. This is what they've used. I think one wanted to paint a tree and one wanted to paint a heart, but this was such a weak paint for them. I make their paint. It's like I'm a paint maker. I'm a father of 2 twin girls, 6-year-olds, and you know, I offer a set of my Junior palette, which is just a pigment loaded paint with mixes, convenience colors, but also single pigments that just pack a punch of color when you put a wet brush on it, and oh, there was a little speck of they just enjoy using those paints. They enjoy painting because they enjoy using those paints. Absolutely right. No, you are absolutely right. But that's the, for me as a business, that's something I need to think about as well, because I see loads of competitors, Etsy, Instagram, not too many on YouTube though, but I see loads of competitors offer convenience mixes, granulating paints, loads and loads of granulating paints. That has been saturated too much. And you know, I think the granulating hype that we've had over the last few years has been started by the handmade watercolor community, but then it has been taken over by Schminke, Talent, Daniel Smith, all kinds of brands that just made granulating sets, mixes, things like that, which is great. But just the idea of why does it granulate? What do the reactions of the different pigments do with each other? And why does it give the effect that so many people love in single pigments is something I'm far more interested in. But that's just, you know, I need to think about my business as well. Because if everyone only would be interested in granulating paints or convenience mixes, you know, I can't go on with this. I can't go on with making just single pigments. I need to go with the flow. I need to keep my head above water. Luckily, we aren't there, and luckily, the world of pigment is getting more attention. Jackson's art, for instance, great little shorts and reels by Evie English, with the pigment videos. Great videos, very much like the Pigment Fact Friday I did on my Instagram a few years back. Great info, really informative, short, fun to watch, loads of great reaction. I'm kind of jealous about that format, but also their reach and their audience is perfect for it. And, you know, so much bigger and so much wider than I can achieve at the moment. So I'm really glad that they're doing that, because a shout out to Jackson's art. I will tag you in this video as well, as others I have mentioned. But shout out to Jackson's art, because you know that people are getting more interested in a pigment or a pigment name, for instance, because I see a little bit of difference there with what I did. For instance, they're talking about Naples yellows, Naples yellow, for instance. I would talk about Naples yellows plus the pigment number, because there's loads of paints that are called Naples yellows right now that aren't Naples yellows. Yeah, yellow. I need to take the S out of that. Model painting, scale models. Yes, I have done that in a past as well, corpse starch, and I still have some acrylics that, if I use acrylics for details, I tend to sometimes just 3D print stuff. I 3D printed Obi-Wan's lightsaber from A New Hope, for instance, and I love the way that turned out, but I used those paints for it, and they are so wonderfully pigmented and so wonderfully, you know, transparent. Pigments are transparent, but they cover so nicely. It's not that they are opaque, but they flow so nicely, better than fluid acrylics or any type of acrylic that you buy from a tube, for instance. I really admire those little bottles of model paint. It's really awesome stuff, actually. I'm also very thankful for those larger accounts that really have a wide reach, that just swatch for people, comparing different manufacturers, brands, makers. I've been, I think, I posted it yesterday on my story on Instagram. I've been lucky enough to have some of my paint swatched and put in the library of Jane Blundell, which is, you know, for me, kind of started the fascination about mixing single pigments. But I really appreciate what she does with her swatch library, sorted on hue, where she makes a distinction between single pigments and mixes in that hue. So it's really nice to have more people here on YouTube as well compare paints, put them next to each other, This is more like I'm making oil paint than watercolor paint. This, I don't know, I know I've used enough binder, but yeah, looking at popularity of swatching videos, I really need to start doing that as well, because I know paint making is a niche within a niche, maybe within a niche, but I really need to look into that. This is just like oil paint. I can just work impasto with this. Like, how? Just going to swatch it. Yeah, Dr. Kano, Jane Blundell, Kimberly Crick, Denise Soden. There are some other, I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, I know those. And I really appreciate what they're doing. Can just, you know, take you. Show it to you as well. I need some more for the mass tone. Well, if you're a big enough account, brands know where to find you. I've seen, I'm seeing that more and more often. That people just, you know, not even sponsoring, but just send free samples to, yeah, for you to share with your audience, if you want to. And then, you know, they don't need anything in return except for, you know, showing off the paint. So letting this swatch dry now. In the meantime, I'm just going to use this for the rest of my paint, since it is too sticky right now to pour into a pan. Okay, so this who the heck can afford to buy? Yes. Well, maybe to run out of my studio to slap paint, and I can afford all the paint. Okay. Well, feel free to do so. Monday evening. When my shop reopens, you can start buying all my paints too. You know, then you have a start. I don't know what, if that's what you meant, but I know I can use it. So now I would be happy if some of those people or channels would use my paint or swatch my paint or review my paint. You know, I'm happy enough if just a channel with 10 followers does the same thing. But as a business, it's just really interesting to get in touch with a larger audience or be introduced to a larger audience, and especially in case of a handmade watercolor paint maker like me, it's really interesting to be introduced to a few 100,000 to millions of viewers, readers, watchers. And yeah, absolutely, I would be very thankful if you compare mine to others. Like, I'm standing fully behind my work, what I do, because I try to be as professional, accurate, transparent, honest about what I do, how I do it, or else I wouldn't make paint live. But if there's anything like I could improve with my paint, or where other brands outshine me, that I can work on, you know, I'm also really happy to get feedback like that. Because I need to be realistic. I can't offer the same amount of different paints as certain big brands. Not yet, maybe once, but it's not something that I aim for at the moment. Thank you very much. That really means a lot to me. And really, I try to improve that even more. I mean, I'm reacting on what you said. I'm clearly no amateur, and my paints are of high quality and are consistent. I've kind of introduced the Hegman gauge to the paint making community because I haven't seen people use this before, and now I see that people buy them more and more, and I really like that. I'm in need of a new one actually, because I noticed that this part around the 30-40 micrometers is getting a little bit damaged, maybe because of some mineral pigments, which are harder. Anyway, this is one of the things that I've used for a long time, but I also want to use my spectrometer. Not for consistency of colors, but to give you something that, if you don't know the website, sadtuna.org, it's a great website run by really someone who is enthusiastic about paints and pigments as we are. His name is Tamas, and he adds photospectral readings of paints where they are provided, and I want to provide mine as well, so people can compare on that hue circle. So where is my ultramarine in hue angle, in saturation, compared to another brand? How is it compared to my Yin Mint, for instance? I will post a link in the chat. One moment, please. Let me have a look here, and I don't need the mobile website since it's bookmarked in my phone, but my laptop takes it. Let me have a... I'm just going to share this, which shows you a list of pigments. And I am in there as a manufacturer as well, which I'm quite proud of. But my colors aren't listed at the moment since I am on holiday mode. But when we're looking at, for instance, the link that I just shared on the pigments, if you just click PB29, for instance, and I'm going to share that as well. Just click on that. Stay in the live stream, please, but just click on this, and have a look at the left side, or maybe the somewhere lower if you're on a mobile device. You see that C-Lab plane, what it's called, with those hue angles, which tells us where in that color space the pigments are, and how saturated that paint or pigment is. It's also for oils. I haven't looked at that. I've only looked at dry pigments and watercolors. But great resource when you're comparing it. The pictures he's using, I think, are stock images of the brands themselves. So, you see the same images of Daniel Smith, for instance, on Jackson's Art, or on Dick Blick, or any website on their own website. There's that same image of a swatch. I think he uses those. I'm not sure if he uses his own. But I will add spectral readings of my pigments as well. And he's giving me a little tool for it, which I can link to my spectrometer. He has the same spectrometer, so I can link that tool to my data, which would give me a nice hue circle with my paints in it as well, if I have finished that up. It's a lot of work to do, guys, but I'm really enthusiastic about the possibilities and the professionalism that I want to kind of get towards. And then there's the thing with a very good contact of mine on Instagram. I've spoken about, what shall I do with my Etsy listings, for instance. Pictures that I need to use. And what they pointed out was the format that I wanted to use looks very much like something you would see at Jackson's website. People who are browsing for watercolors would recognize it and would know what they see. But people on Etsy, where my shop is located, wouldn't know what to do with a picture like that. And they were absolutely right about that. On the other hand, there's that balance I need to find, because I want to, every aspect of my business, of my brand of Dirty Blue, I want to be as professional as possible. Starting from printing pens with the pigment number in it, how I measure, how I test pigments and paints, my entire process, until the part, where people buy it and use my paint. But would Etsy be the right audience for it? But if I make my own website, I am bound to the audience that I already have, that will use the link to my website, because they know what to, where to go. But it's harder to kind of get your head above water on Google when you start looking for handmade watercolors or Etsy. So it's difficult. I don't want to have like the same look that some people use of their Etsy listings, and I don't want to do that just to hit my kind of target audience, or a wider range of audience. And I'm ranting again, but that's what happens when you are working with a paint that is really stubborn to work with. If I can share my favorite acrylics, I think I would end up at golden, I think. That's what I used to use mostly when I was still using acrylics. And the way that they communicate with that product, just the transparency of which pigments are used, what do they look on the label, is something that I really enjoy watching how they kind of present that product. And that's that little piece of pigment education that we miss with a lot of brands. A swatch of the paint on the tube so you can actually see the transparency. Not a plastic tube that you can just, you know, see the paint in, because that doesn't say anything about transparency of the paint. When using it as a paint, well, what was your favorite maker then? It kind of feels like it was a small business when you say they grew too big and expensive. Which is kind of weird to me, reading that sentence, thinking about my own business, because I am quite expensive when you compare me to very big brands, and especially some lines of paints of those big brands. But I need to have like this price point, or else I really don't make any money out of it, because I'm working on a small scale. But the bigger you get, I would say, the more affordable you can work. It doesn't matter how much water I put in there, really. It's a great website, isn't it? Oh, that was not enough paint. That didn't really flow at all as well. And it's not there yet, or this one is still dirty, but okay. So what I'm doing now, I'm just scooping it in a clean bottle, and I'm going to continue with this in small batches, because I actually just want to continue to work on a different color. It's a great trick, by the way. If you have ever, this is like oil paint. I'm just going to spray this with enough water. There are 2 metal bowls in here in each jar. Writing on the pigment on it. And I will just pour this out. Stir it nicely and pour it out in smaller batches, so I can just finish this color. Because this has been quite a hard life for people to watch when they don't like blue, I think. They were in Vancouver in the 80s and 90s. Would that be enough info to know which company it was? I think it is, actually. But I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to look it up later. As you can see, this was a fraction, I think 10% of the paint I can make out of this. And you can see the difference of mulling. I didn't really think about the amount of pigment and how thirsty that pigment is. Sorry about this, guys. I was so into that Victoria green from before and the Caput Mortuum that just, you know, don't bulk up. This right now is a completely different paint. It feels different. It flows differently. So remember, guys, making PV60 small batch at a time. Which I did know before, but didn't think about. And still, I have like, I've used like 10% of that original amount of paint, added water to it, and still it is like a thick paste, but not as thick as it was. And right now I can just see that this is so much better than it was, or than I could have gotten it with that amount of paint. I want to really thanks everyone for just sticking around here, by the way. After this, I am going, because it's almost lunchtime, and especially after this, probably going to take a shower, because as you can see here, it's already getting sunny, but that wall and window plane over there is kind of radiating heat on me already. And this is what you want. Right now I just can't hear it anymore. Just the stickiness of it. But it's smooth, it's glossy. I don't see any grains in it anymore. Oh yeah, I heard about them. It wasn't what I had in mind, but I've heard about them. I have never worked with the paint though. Okay, let's start filling some pans with, sorry for the noise by the way, small layers, putting in a dot like that, tapping it around to make it spread out evenly on the bottom of the pan. Ah, that's a shame. If there's a dot on top of it and you tap it, it goes like that. Then you did use very large canvases, yes. I saw I don't think it was a documentary, but it was a video about Jim Carrey, the actor, who is a painter as well. He works with acrylics a lot, big canvases, and I saw him in his studio. I don't know if anyone else has seen that part or that video. He was surrounded by, I think, gallon bottles of acrylics by Golden. Their logo was on it. clearly visible, or all the branding was there, but there were containers. I've never seen containers like that of Golden. Maybe because in Europe it's imported, but I was amazed by the amount of beautiful colors that I actually love using myself in containers like that. So I can't do the tapping way with a dot, so I need to kind of push it in the sides first. There we go. Well, I can imagine, if you're an artist that, works in size like that, for them it's just a matter of a different container with acrylics. It's not, like watercolor pens in sizes that you don't usually sell. It's just pouring it into a different container. And obviously, marketing-wise, thinking about that as a business, having a documentary or a film with a famous actor like Jim Carrey in his studio with his work, surrounded by gallon bottles of your brand, isn't a bad thing either. I don't know if anyone here knows any celebrity that works with watercolors, but I'm happy to send them a sample of my watercolors for them to use and show. Okay. For this pigment, I'm calling it a day for now. So I'm going to wash up, clean everything up. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you very much for the chat, for joining me here while making way too much of Indent Throne Blue for my slab. Anyway, I'm going to continue doing that as well. Yes, Lindell, welcome. I think the royal family does have, or is like connected with watercolor art, or is involved in, is working in. Yes, but I think they're also connected to a brand already. From Australia, welcome. Well, it's quite late there, isn't it? We have some early birds, people up late here, and I need to get ready for lunch. I need to wash up, need to clean this. I'm going to do that off camera because, or else I'm really tempted to stick in the chat, and really, I'm very thankful for it. King Charles painted watercolors most of his life. Oh, 6:40. Okay, okay. No, that's not too bad. I thought it was like a 12-hour difference. It's only 6 hours. How about that? It's 12:40 here. I need to pick up my kids around in an hour, and I need to wash up. I need to clean this. I need to take a shower, really, after my Indent Throne Blue PV60 adventure with you. I really need to take a shower, and I need to get lunch. So thanks for being here. It was a great chat again, really thankful. Just a little self-promo in the end. Please like this live stream, share it with anyone, share my channel with anyone you know. If you want to buy something, coming Monday, my shop will reopen at 8:30 in the evening, my time. So it's a little bit early for you, Lyndall, but overseas to the west that's more doable for you guys. Those are pre-orders. Most of them, but most of the products that I will put in my shop are pre-orders. So don't worry about it being sold out. It's kind of for me to measure, okay, what is the popularity of which color before I start making 40 pans of each individual pigment, while I should be focused on other pigments. So it's more like, it's been a few months since I closed my shop. I bought new pigments, I've looked at different pigments, tried out new recipes, had more ideas that aren't in my shop yet, ideas that will be in my shop. One of them will be the dot card that I'm also working on for you to sample it. These are about the same size dots as in my as are in my dot pans, with a QR to my shop and a QR to my YouTube. One question for those of you who want to visit my shop, please use the link in my profile here or in the bio on my Instagram, because I've made my own shop, and it sounds really weird, but this is my way of trying to find a way in between all the different ways there are. I've made the link in my bios a affiliate link for my own shop, which is kind of a loophole on Etsy. I'm getting a percentage back from Etsy of what people buy by using that link. So you can share that affiliate link as well. It would help me with a little bit of percentage that Etsy otherwise takes on the other end, like transactional fees, like the buyer or the seller fee, any form of tax that they put on their fees, the communication. There's loads of fees on Etsy that are taken off by using Etsy. But Etsy as a platform, I'm really thankful for it being there as well, because it has introduced a wider range of watercolor users, artists, to my paints, which otherwise was very difficult to achieve. So I'm very thankful for Etsy, and I'm sticking to Etsy as well. For shipping, it's easier for me. There's a little bit of insurance for you as a buyer, for me as a seller. If the postal office loses it, you don't need to ask me for a refund, but Etsy will solve that. I don't need to contact my shipping company. Etsy will solve that. So it's a lot of things taken out of my hands, taken out of your hands, for everyone to have a better experience. And I'm not making like this is not a commercial time for Etsy or anything, but I know, and people who buy handmade watercolor paints know, that loads of people have opened their own shop and closed their Etsy because they thought the percentage that Etsy asked was too high. I agree that you lose a lot of percentage that you otherwise could have kept yourself, but this is my way of kind of the loophole. Affiliate link of my own shop by getting a percentage back of the people who use that link. So that's enough of me. Everyone have a great day. See you next time. I've been live for almost 3 hours, so for me it's time to get a drink as well, other than the coffee I just had. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining, and see you again.